Today is Wednesday, September 24th. We're talking about President Trump bashing the United Nations, why he even told some world leaders, quote, "Your countries are going to hell." And we'll tell you about his change of heart when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Also, we'll recap an emotional opening monologue from Jimmy Kimmel as he came back on the air. Plus, plans for a Trump presidential library, big tech's latest big investment into an AI future, and robot umpires coming to Major League Baseball. Those stories and even more news coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. President Trump addressed the United Nations and sharply criticized its members. Among his many grievances were other countries' immigration policies. He said the current American immigration crackdown should be used as a case study for other leaders to slow down mass migration globally, which he says is changing the fabric of countries around the world. Or as Trump put it, quote, "Your countries are going to hell." Another top issue for the president in his speech was climate change, which he called the, quote, "greatest con job." He urged other countries to get rid of green energy initiatives and to go back to fossil fuels, saying countries that break the rules will end up owning the market. In one of the most critical parts of his address, President Trump complained the UN has not been supporting his efforts to end conflicts around the world. Trump spoke about his role in bringing about a deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and more. And he argued he was doing what the UN really should, but that all the UN does is write strongly worded letters and speak in empty words. The organization's leader met with Trump after his speech. UN leaders say they discussed peace and humanitarian efforts, efficiency, the private sector, and more. And at that meeting, Trump struck a different tone, saying, quote, "Our country is behind the United Nations 100%. But even before the General Assembly, the president had withdrawn the U.S. from the UN's Human Rights Council, the World Health Organization, and the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization known as UNESCO, just to name a few of the ways the U.S. is cutting ties. And the president has ordered a review of America's broader role in the organization. The Trump administration already withdrew $1 billion in funding for the United Nations and has plans to cut another $1 billion, adding to the funding shortfall at the UN. The mood was a lot different than the last time President Trump spoke at the UN and was met with laughter. This time, the room was mostly silent. And after his speech, President Trump had several one-on-one meetings with other world leaders. Well, soon after his United Nations address, President Trump got onto social media and expressed a pretty abrupt change of opinion on Ukraine. He said the country was in a position to fight and win all of its territory back, even though for a while now, Trump has been saying Ukraine would need to give up some of its land to end the war. But the president says he has now gotten to know and fully understand the situation. His change of heart came soon after a meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky. And today, Zelensky is scheduled to address the entire United Nations. By the way, when a reporter asked Trump if he thought NATO members should shoot down Russian aircraft in their airspace, he responded yes, and he said the U.S. would keep sending weapons to NATO. But Trump also said it was inexcusable that some European countries were still buying Russian oil, saying, quote, "They're funding the war against themselves." Russia also gets a lot of business from India and China. One of the people accused of trying to kill President Trump has now been convicted and could face life in prison. The jury found the man guilty of targeting Trump while he was a presidential candidate on his West Palm Beach golf course. As Secret Service agents testified, the gunman had propped up a semi-automatic rifle through a chain-link fence. One agent opened fire, so the suspect ran away and was arrested about an hour later. There wasn't a lot of defense in the trial since the suspect fired his public defenders before it started. Then after the verdicts were announced, he tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen, but U.S. Marshals stopped him. President Trump celebrated the verdict on social media, calling it a very big moment for justice in America. The U.S. is now less than a week away from a government shutdown. President Trump originally had a meeting planned to talk with Democrats this week, but he ended up canceling, saying the Dems' demands were unserious and ridiculous. So now there aren't any negotiations set to find a way out of a potential crisis. Publicly, President Trump and other Republicans are pushing for a 7-week workaround to keep the government funded until a potentially bigger deal can be reached later this fall. But Democrats say before they sign on, they want to restore billions of dollars in healthcare funds for Affordable Care Act subsidies and Medicaid. Unless a deal is made by the end of this month, the government will effectively be unfunded. To be continued. Late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel is back. He hosted his first show last night since his suspension was lifted. Kimmel started off with a 15-minute monologue directly addressing the controversy that took him off the air. At one point, he choked up, saying he never meant to make light of a murder when he mentioned the death of Charlie Kirk on his show. Kimmel also said he never meant to blame any specific group for the actions of the person who killed Kirk. And he thanked ABC for giving him back his platform to speak. But Kimmel also sharply criticized President Trump and the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, who said on a podcast interview last week that ABC had to punish Kimmel. Last night, the host called that un-American censorship. He went on to say his show is not important, but what is that, quote, we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this. Kimmel went on to thank his supporters, fellow late-night comics, and even conservatives like Senator Ted Cruz for agreeing with him on that and speaking up on his behalf. But not everyone is happy to see him reinstated. Even before Kimmel's comeback show aired, President Trump wrote about it on Truth Social, saying he was surprised to find out the host would be returning and that he's prepared to keep fighting ABC over this. Local broadcasters Nexstar and Sinclair say they'll keep Kimmel off the air. Combined, the affiliates they own and operate reach about 22% of U.S. households. By the way, another show seems to be making an effort to avoid this kind of controversy altogether. Apple TV Plus announced it's going to postpone its upcoming thriller series, The Savant. The show, starring Jessica Chastain, is about domestic extremism and online hate groups who work on planning politically motivated attacks. Many reports say the plot points overlap too closely with the real-world events of Kirk's assassination. But Apple didn't actually give an exact reason for putting off the show's release, and it also has not announced how long it might be shelved. Stay tuned. All right, we have more news for you still coming up, but first, the Newsworthy is brought to you by BetterHelp. Life can feel like a lot, and while friends and family are great and supportive, sometimes I just want to enjoy their company without getting into any of our concerns. Plus, let's be honest, most just simply don't have the training and credentials to always know what to say or give you the best advice. And that's where a therapist comes in. For me, having someone trained to listen, ask the right questions, and push me in a supportive way has made all the difference. And if you're not sure where to start, BetterHelp makes it easy. They've made it simple to connect with a licensed therapist online, just a quick questionnaire, and you're matched with someone chosen for your needs. And yet, if it doesn't feel like the right fit, you can switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. Now, back to the news. President Trump's team has started making plans for his future presidential library, and that includes choosing a location in an iconic stretch of downtown Miami, Florida. It's on the waterfront and next to the Freedom Tower, which played a significant role in the migration of Cuban refugees in the 60s and early 70s. It's considered a symbol of the city's immigrant heritage and a refuge for people fleeing communism. The exact property selected for the presidential library is 2.6 acres, and Trump's team is hoping it can eventually be part of a larger development that will include an adjacent hotel. That would make this the first presidential library to also be home to a hotel development. The land was just transferred to the state yesterday, and the formal decision to dedicate the land to the library will be voted on next week by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his cabinet. The vote is expected to be unanimous. The U.S. Secret Service apparently stopped a plan to take out cell service near the United Nations this week. Agents say they discovered more than 300 SIM card servers and 100,000 SIM cards at several locations within a 35-mile radius of New York City. So they dismantled them. Networks of SIM cards and servers can be used to send anonymous threats, overwhelm communications networks, and disable cell towers. Bloomberg cites sources who say it seems with this network, there are ties to at least one foreign country, as well as links to criminals already on law enforcement's radar, including cartel members. But so far, investigators have not released much information about exactly who could be responsible and exactly what their plan was. The Secret Service says this was the largest operation of its kind that the agency has ever taken on. OpenAI announced deals with two other tech giants, SoftBank and Oracle. They're working together to build 5 new data centers that could offer 7 gigawatts of power over the next 3 years. That's the equivalent of 7 large nuclear reactors. Already, we told you it agreed to a $100 billion investment from chipmaker NVIDIA. Some critics have raised environmental concerns. Others say it puts too much AI infrastructure in the hands of too few companies. But OpenAI CEO said this kind of massive expansion is necessary to make a lot of things possible. He explained that limiting computing power could mean having to choose between competing priorities, like curing cancer or providing a personalized tutor for every student on Earth. So his company is looking into even more sites now and expects to announce another Midwest location soon. Major League Baseball has decided to introduce a new era of umpiring. It will be bringing on robot umpires for next season. It comes after years of testing in the minor leagues, as well as during spring training and at this year's All-Star game. Now, to be clear, human plate umpires will still call balls and strikes, but for the first time, a new system will give each team 2 challenges per game and more for extra innings. And in those cases, the robot umps will review using Hawkeye cameras. Of course, this is just the latest major rule change for the MLB. Last year, it also introduced a pitch clock, larger bases, and more. And now managers say players are going to have to adjust to another shift that will, quote, change the game forever. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Work Wednesday, when we break down one interesting career or work-related news story every Wednesday. But first, a quick break for our sponsor. When I first started using OneSkin, I was not quite sure what to expect, but I've been pleasantly surprised at just how much I've liked all of their products, from their face and eye creams to their SPF. They feel great, and they're backed by real science. For those of you familiar with OneSkin already, you know how their OS1 peptide is scientifically proven to target aging at the cellular level. Now it's targeting your scalp, too, because your scalp is skin. OneSkin created OS1 Hair, a lightweight, drug-free serum that supports a healthier scalp, which means healthier, stronger hair. And the results are impressive. In a clinical study, participants saw, on average, a 40% increase in hair density after 6 months. And in a consumer perception study, 75% had new hair growth after just 3 months. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin and scalp looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using code NEWSWORTHY at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with the code NEWSWORTHY. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support our show and tell them we sent you. Okay, now back to Work Wednesday. One of the richest companies in the world has decided to invest another $1 billion, this time in its own employees. Amazon says the money will go toward raising pay and lowering healthcare costs for its workers, both those who work in fulfillment and transportation. And that pushes up the average Amazon pay rate to more than $23 an hour. The cost of its entry-level healthcare plan is going down to $5 a week and $5 for copays. This all comes after a series of walkouts last year, with employees protesting what they said was Amazon's unfair treatment of its workers. The company now has more than 1.5 million full-time and part-time employees. It also hires temporary workers and independent contractors seasonally, especially around the holidays. Well, thank you so much for listening today and for telling other people about the Newsworthy. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest news to know. Until then, have a great day.